Malik had worked at the Hollow Oak for 3 years, and in that time, he'd perfected the art of being invisible. As a black waiter in one of the city's most exclusive fine dining restaurants, he learned early that his job wasn't just to serve food, but to fade into the background of wealthy conversations and clinking glasses. That evening, the air smelled of truffle oil and aged wine, and the dimly lit chandeliers sparkled like constellations. Malik glided between tables, balancing a silver tray of crystal glasses, his crisp white shirt and bow tie stiff against his skin. It was just another Thursday until the door swung open and Harold Cresswell walked in. The billionaire didn't need an introduction. His face was on every magazine cover, his name etched into skyscrapers, and his fortune whispered about like legend. Tonight, Harold was dressed sharply in a navy suit that probably cost more than Malik's yearly salary. Flanked by two stone-faced bodyguards and a group of executives dripping with arrogance, he swept into the room like he owned it. Because he did. Malik was assigned to their table. He kept his head down, took drink orders, and returned moments later with glasses of bourbon. As he set Harold's glass on the table, his eyes caught something small but impossible to ignore. A ring. It sat on Harold's right hand, platinum and antique-looking, shaped like an eagle mid-flight, its eyes made of two tiny emeralds. Malik's breath hitched. He'd seen that ring before. At home, in a small jewelry box his mother kept locked away. The same eagle, the same emerald eyes. She told him once it was a gift from someone she never talked about, brushing the story off whenever he asked. Malik's heart pounded. He knew he shouldn't speak. It wasn't professional, but the words slipped out before he could stop them. "Sir, my mom has the same ring." The entire table went silent. Conversations froze mid-sentence, and forks hovered halfway to mouths. Harold Cresswell looked up slowly, his piercing blue eyes narrowing at Malik with a sharpness that could cut glass. "What did you just say?" Harold's voice was low, almost dangerous. Malik felt the weight of every eye on him, but forced the words out anyway. "That ring on your hand. My mom has the same one." For a moment, Harold's expression was unreadable. Then his face paled and his jaw tightened. The billionaire's hand curled into a fist, hiding the ring from view. Around the table, executives shifted uncomfortably, exchanging tense glances. One of them whispered something, but Harold raised a hand to silence him. The air felt heavy, electric, and then, without another word, Harold stood abruptly, his chair screeching against the polished floor. He tossed a thick wad of cash onto the table and muttered to his assistant, "We're leaving now." The billionaire walked out, his bodyguards trailing behind him, leaving behind a stunned silence that swallowed the entire dining room. Malik stood frozen, the tray still balanced in his hands, his mind spinning. He had no idea what he had just triggered, but deep down, he knew life would never be the same. The restaurant buzzed with soft murmurs as Harold Cresswell's entourage swept out the door, leaving behind an uncomfortable silence. Malik stood rooted to the spot, his heart pounding in his chest like a war drum. The other guests went back to their wine and conversation, but a few stole curious glances at him, as if wondering what a lowly waiter could have said to make a billionaire flee in such haste. Malik swallowed hard, forcing himself to move. He cleared the table mechanically, his fingers trembling as he collected the untouched glass of bourbon Harold had left behind. His mind kept replaying the moment Harold's eyes locked on his, the flash of shock, the tightening of his jaw, and the way his hand curled protectively over the ring. He barely heard his manager's voice until it cut sharply through his thoughts. "Malik, what did you say to him?" Malik looked up to see Mr. Green, the restaurant manager, marching over. His face was red with irritation. "Do you have any idea who that was? You can't just engage in small talk with people like Cresswell." Malik began, his voice weak. "I didn't mean anything by it. I just noticed his ring. My mom has the same one. That's all I said." Green's eyes flickered, confusion briefly softening his anger. But he quickly recovered. "Well, don't do it again. You're lucky he didn't demand you be fired on the spot." Malik nodded mutely, though the manager's words barely registered. He finished his shift in a haze, and by the time the restaurant closed for the night, his hands still felt clammy. Back in his small South Side apartment, Malik collapsed onto his couch. The hum of the city beyond his window was distant, muffled under the weight of what had happened. He grabbed his phone, scrolling through photos until he found one of his mom, Danielle Brooks, smiling in a sunlit kitchen, the faint glint of a ring on her finger. The same eagle, the same emerald eyes. His mother had always been tight-lipped about her past. She worked as a nurse for years, raised him alone, and never once spoke about his father. When Malik pressed, she'd simply say, "Some stories are better left buried." But now, Malik's curiosity burned hotter than ever. On impulse, he called her. "Malik? It's late, baby. You okay?" Danielle's voice was warm but edged with worry. "Mom, your ring. Where did you get it?" A pause. "Why are you asking about that?" she said cautiously. "I saw a man tonight, Harold Cresswell. He had the exact same one." The silence on the other end stretched long enough for Malik to check if the call had disconnected. Finally, Danielle spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Harold, you saw Harold?" "Yeah. Do you know him?" Her exhale was shaky, heavy. "Malik, there are things I never told you. Things I hoped you'd never have to know. But if you saw that man, then maybe it's time." Malik sat up straight, his pulse thundering in his ears. "What do you mean? Mom, what aren't you telling me?" Danielle's voice cracked as she said the words that would change his world forever. "Harold Cresswell, he's your father." Malik felt the air leave his lungs as if someone had punched him in the chest. The room seemed to tilt, his phone slick in his suddenly trembling hands. "Harold Cresswell, your father." The words echoed in his mind, loud and impossible to ignore. For years, he'd imagined his father as a nameless, faceless figure, a man too weak or too heartless to stay. Now that void had a face, a billionaire's face. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Malik's voice cracked as he gripped the phone tighter. Danielle sighed on the other end, a sound so heavy it carried decades of pain. "I never wanted you to find out like this. I thought I could protect you from his world, from the way those people treat anyone who doesn't fit their mold. Start from the beginning," Malik said, trying to steady his racing heart. "I met Harold when I was 23, she began slowly. I was a temp assistant at Cresswell Enterprises. He was magnetic, charming, ambitious, already running his father's company. He noticed me in a room full of power brokers. For a while, I thought it meant something." Her voice broke, and Malik felt a pang in his chest. She continued, "But Harold wasn't looking for forever. He wasn't looking for love, just someone to make him feel alive. When I found out I was pregnant, I went to him. He didn't deny the child was his. He didn't argue or curse or accuse me of trapping him. He just wrote a check." Malik shut his eyes tightly. "He paid you off?" "Yes," she whispered. "Enough money to disappear and raise you far from his world. He said he couldn't let a scandal destroy his name. He promised he cared, but not enough to fight for us." Malik felt sick. He stood and began pacing his small apartment, anger sparking in his veins. "So, all these years, he lived like a king while we struggled. You worked yourself to the bone, and he couldn't even look at me." "It wasn't about you, Malik. You are not his shame. He is." Malik rubbed his temples, his emotions a storm of rage, confusion, and betrayal. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want you growing up thinking you weren't enough. I wanted you to stand on your own 2 feet without carrying the weight of his choices." Her words softened him, but only slightly. "Do you still have anything of his?" "Proof." There was a pause before Danielle said, "Check my keepsake box." "In the hall closet. Bottom drawer." Malik didn't hesitate. He found the box and opened it carefully, the scent of old paper and faint perfume wafting out. Inside were baby photos, hospital bracelets, and cards. But at the very bottom was a small envelope marked private. With shaking hands, Malik opened it and pulled out a photograph. His mother, younger and radiant, stood beside a man in a tailored suit. Harold Cresswell. His arm was draped around her shoulders, and on his hand gleamed the eagle ring with emerald eyes. On the back of the photo were words scrawled in elegant handwriting. To my Danielle, we'll fix this someday. HC. There was also a folded letter in the envelope. Malik unfolded it, his eyes scanning the words. Danielle, I can't give you what you deserve. I can't give the boy my name. But I swear to you, one day I'll make this right. Until then, take this and build the life I can't give you. Harold the life Harold couldn't give them. The promise Harold never kept. Malik stared at the letter and the photo, the truth coiling tight in his gut. This wasn't just a coincidence. Harold had known. All these years, he'd chosen silence. Malik's jaw tightened. He wouldn't stay silent. Not anymore. Malik sat motionless in the dim light of his apartment, the photograph and letter trembling in his hands. His mother's soft voice echoed in his mind. I didn't want you to grow up thinking you weren't enough. But now, that's exactly how he felt, like a shadow of a man who had never even bothered to look his way. His blood boiled as his thoughts spiraled. While Harold Crestwell dined in luxury and signed billion-dollar contracts, Malik and his mother had been scraping by, counting every penny, enduring broken heaters and secondhand schoolbooks. He thought of the times he'd asked Danielle about his father, the way her eyes would cloud with sadness as she muttered, "It doesn't matter who he was. What matters is who you are." Now, he knew why she'd been so careful. Harold had been more than absent. He had bought Malik's silence before he was even born. Malik grabbed the ring photo again, staring at the cold, emerald eyes of the eagle. That symbol of wealth and power felt like a curse mocking him. His stomach churned with a mixture of rage and shame. For years, he had believed he was just another kid from Southside. No father, no legacy, no connection to the glittering towers uptown. But all along, his bloodline tied him to one of the richest, most powerful men in the country. He texted his mother, "I need to see you tomorrow. We need to talk." Her reply came quickly, but it was only 2 words. "I know." That night, Malik couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Harold's face when he mentioned the ring, the flicker of recognition, the flash of fear. What was Harold afraid of? That the world would discover his secret son? That his empire might crack under the weight of his hypocrisy? For the first time in his life, Malik didn't feel powerless. He felt dangerous. By morning, Malik made up his mind. He couldn't just bury this revelation and go back to being invisible. He needed answers. He needed to confront the man who had tossed him aside like an inconvenience. He wanted Harold to look him in the eye and admit it, admit he was Malik's father, admit he had failed them both, and admit that no amount of money could ever erase that failure. As he dressed for work, Malik stared at himself in the cracked bathroom mirror. For the first time, he searched for Harold in his own reflection. The strong jaw, the sharp cheekbones, the piercing eyes, features he now realized he hadn't inherited from his mother. He clenched his fists. This wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about reclaiming the part of himself Harold had tried to erase. Malik knew what he had to do next. He wasn't going to wait for Harold to pretend the night at the restaurant never happened. He was going to force Harold Crestwell to face him. And this time, Malik wasn't going to be invisible. The morning sun barely broke through the heavy clouds as Malik sat at his small kitchen table, staring at his phone like it was an unexploded bomb. His thumb hovered over the number his mother had given him the night before, a number she said hadn't worked in years, but might still be tied to Harold Crestwell's private line. Malik's chest felt tight. His hands shook, but his jaw was set. He couldn't back down now. He dialed. The call rang once, twice, a third time. Malik's pulse hammered in his ears. Then on the 4th ring, the line clicked, and a deep, curt voice answered. "This is Crestwell." For a split second, Malik froze. The voice was sharp and cold, the same tone Harold had used at the restaurant. It was the voice of a man accustomed to control, to issuing orders. "You know who this is," Malik said, finally, his voice steady though his heart raced. Silence. On the other end, Malik could hear faint breathing, then the sound of a chair creaking, When Harold spoke again, the arrogance had been replaced by something harder to read. Was it irritation or fear? I wondered how long it would take you to call, Harold said. What do you want? I want answers, Malik replied. You walked out the other night like you'd seen a ghost. You didn't even deny it. I need you to say it out loud. Are you my father? Another pause. A sharp exhale. Meet me, Harold said, finally, his tone clipped. Tomorrow, noon, Cresswell Tower. Take the private elevator to the 48th floor. Come alone. Don't bring anyone, not even your mother. Why? So you can buy me off like you did her. Malik shot back, heat rising in his voice. I said come alone, Harold repeated firmly. Or this conversation ends here. The line went dead. Malik slammed the phone on the table, his chest heaving. His instincts screamed that Harold wasn't calling this meeting out of goodwill. No, this was about control. Harold wanted to dictate the terms, keep him contained like a problem to be managed. But Malik wasn't that scared little boy anymore. He stared at the photograph on the table, his mother and Harold, smiling in a moment that now felt like a cruel illusion. Then his eyes drifted to the letter, to the promise Harold never kept. I'll make this right. Tomorrow, Malik muttered to himself, gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. Tomorrow, you're going to look me in the eyes and say those words. No more running. No more lies. For the first time, Malik felt something new. A quiet fury, not hot like rage, but cold and sharp like a blade. Whatever Harold was hiding, Malik was determined to drag it into the light. The next day, Malik stood in the gleaming lobby of Cresswell Tower, his reflection staring back at him from the polished marble floor. He felt like an imposter in this world of tailored suits, leather briefcases, and hushed conversations. But this time, he wasn't here to serve drinks or clear tables. He was here to confront the man who had denied his existence. The private elevator doors slid open silently, and Malik stepped inside. As the car ascended, his stomach twisted into knots. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay calm. The higher he rose, the more he felt like he was entering Harold Cresswell's kingdom. When the doors opened on the 48th floor, Malik was greeted by a vast office space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. The air smelled faintly of expensive cologne and leather. Harold sat behind a massive mahogany desk, his hands folded neatly, his expression unreadable. Malik, Harold said coolly, as if they were acquaintances meeting for coffee. Sit down. Malik ignored the chair. I didn't come here to sit. I came for the truth. Harold's jaw tightened. The truth is complicated and dangerous. Dangerous for who? Malik shot back. For you? Your empire? Or for me? The son you left behind like trash? Harold sighed and leaned back in his chair. I didn't leave you behind. I protected you. Protected me? Malik's voice rose. Do you know how many nights my mom cried herself to sleep? How many times I asked her why my father wasn't around? I know, Harold said quietly, and I regret it more than you'll ever understand. But you need to realize there were people who would have destroyed both of you if I claimed you. Malik's brow furrowed. What are you talking about? Harold hesitated before pulling open a drawer. He slid a thick document across the desk. This is a non-disclosure agreement. Sign it, and in exchange, I'll set you up for life, your education, a house, a trust fund. No one needs to know who you are. Malik stared at the papers, anger bubbling in his chest. You're still trying to buy your way out. You think throwing money at me will make me disappear? It's not about money, Harold said, his voice rising for the first time. It's about survival. You don't know the people I've had to deal with. If they knew about you, they'd see you as leverage. Then let them, Malik snapped. I won't live my life in your shadow. You're making a mistake, Harold warned, his icy composure slipping. No, Malik said, his voice steady. You did. The day you chose your empire over your own son. He pushed the document back across the desk and turned to leave. As the elevator doors closed behind him, Harold's voice echoed in the office, soft but filled with dread. They'll come for you now. Malik didn't flinch. For the first time, he felt free. The elevator doors closed with a soft chime, sealing Malik inside the glass capsule as it descended Cresswell Tower. He stared at his reflection in the mirrored walls, fists clenched so tight his knuckles ached. His heart was pounding, not from fear, but from clarity. Harold had offered him a gilded cage, a fortune in exchange for silence. But Malik wouldn't let himself be bought like a piece of property. By the time he stepped back into the busy streets, the roar of the city felt louder, sharper. Harold's warning echoed in his head, "They'll come for you now." Malik didn't know who they were, and he didn't care. He wasn't going to let his father's shadow swallow him whole. That night, Malik sat at his kitchen table, the photo of Harold and his mother lying next to him. He scrolled through his phone until he found the contact he needed. Sarah Lynn, a journalist known for breaking high-profile corporate scandals. He'd served her coffee once when she dined at the Hollow Oak, and she'd left her card just in case you ever see something the world needs to know. He hesitated for only a moment before calling her. "Sarah Lynn," she answered briskly. "You don't know me," Malik said, "but I have a story about Harold Cresswell. And proof." There was a pause on the other end. Then her voice sharpened. "Go on. I'm his son. He paid off my mother to hide me for over 20 years. I've got photos, letters, everything." Another pause, this time heavier. "Meet me tomorrow morning." Discreetly. By dawn, Malik was sitting in a quiet cafe across from Sarah. He slid the photograph and letter across the table, watching her eyes widen as she scanned the evidence. "This will shake the city to its core," she murmured. "You understand the storm this will create?" "I don't care," Malik said firmly. "This isn't about revenge. It's about the truth. I want the world to know who Harold Cresswell really is." Within hours, the headline broke across every major news outlet. Billionaire Harold Cresswell accused of paying off secret son's mother to avoid scandal. The reaction was instantaneous. Social media exploded with outrage, curiosity, and speculation. News vans parked outside Cresswell Tower, their cameras aimed high. Malik watched it all unfold on TV, his phone buzzing nonstop with calls and messages from unknown numbers. But one message froze his blood. A text from an unknown sender. "You shouldn't have done that. Now you're on their radar." Malik stared at the screen, his chest tightening. Was this what Harold meant by they? Was there more at stake than he realized? For the first time, Malik wondered if he had underestimated the world his father lived in and the enemies that came with it. But there was no turning back now. The truth was out, and there was no more hiding. The sound of her phone vibrating on the kitchen counter startled Danielle awake. She hadn't slept more than an hour, her mind looping through fears she hadn't let herself feel in decades. The moment she answered, her heart sank. It wasn't Malik. It was her neighbor. "Danielle, turn on the news. It's about, well, you and your boy." With trembling fingers, she grabbed the remote and switched on the television. There it was, Malik's name plastered across the bottom of the screen. A photo of her younger self standing beside Harold Cresswell in that cursed photograph. News anchors spoke in urgent tones about a secret son hush money and a billionaire family scandal. Danielle felt her knees weaken as she collapsed into the chair at the kitchen table. This was it, the moment she had spent years trying to prevent. All her efforts to shield Malik from Harold's world had been wiped away in an instant. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Malik. "Mom," he said softly, his voice different now, steady resolve but edged with guilt. "I'm sorry. I had to do it. I couldn't let him erase us anymore." Tears stung Danielle's eyes. "Baby, you don't know what you've unleashed. That man's life isn't just built on money. It's built on secrets. And secrets have claws." "Let them come," Malik said, trying to sound brave, but Danielle heard the strain in his voice. "I'm not afraid." "You should be," she whispered. "Harold isn't the only one with something to lose." As they spoke, her doorbell rang. Danielle stiffened. Through the peephole, she saw two men in dark suits standing outside, not reporters, but the kind of men who moved with quiet authority. "Stay where you are," Danielle warned Malik. "Don't open your door for anyone." Later that evening, an unmarked envelope appeared under Danielle's front door. Inside was a single sheet of paper with no signature. "You've started a war you don't understand. Stop Malik before we stop him for you." Her blood ran cold. Meanwhile, across the city, Harold Crestwell sat in his office, surrounded by panicked executives and lawyers. His phone rang endlessly, shareholders demanding answers, politicians whispering about investigations. For the first time in years, the untouchable Harold looked shaken. Finally, he excused himself, closed his office door, and made a call. "Get me Malik. Now, before this goes any further." But Malik wasn't answering. He stood in his apartment, staring at his own phone. He had received a text, too, from the same unknown number as before. "Your mother isn't as safe as you think." Malik's jaw tightened. This wasn't just about family anymore. It was a battle, and the opening shots had just been fired. Harold Crestwell sat at the head of the massive glass conference table, his normally sharp gaze dulled by fatigue. Around him, his board of directors buzzed like a swarm of angry bees, voices raised in panic and accusation. "This scandal is tanking our stock value," one man shouted, slamming a report onto the table. "Investors are pulling out, Harold. We've already lost 70 million in market cap overnight. This isn't just bad press anymore." A woman interjected. "The regulators are sniffing around. They want to know how much of this. Hush money was buried in the books. If they find anything, the SEC will gut us alive." Harold pinched the bridge of his nose, trying to quiet the pounding in his skull. He'd built Crestwell Enterprises from the ground up, weathered recessions, political storms, and competitors' attacks. But he hadn't anticipated this. Malik's face, Danielle's name, and that damned photograph were plastered across every screen in the country. "Enough!" Harold barked, his voice slicing through the chaos. The room fell silent. "You all think I know what's at stake here? That I don't know how much damage this boy has caused? He is my problem, and I'll handle him." A senior board member leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "Then handle him, Harold, before the shareholders vote you out." Harold's eyes narrowed. "What are you suggesting?" "Bring the boy in," the man said calmly. "Legitimize him. Make him a partner in a foundation or subsidiary. Spin the story as if you've been reconnecting in private for years. If he's part of the empire, the scandal turns into a redemption arc. Investors eat that up." Harold's jaw clenched. "You're asking me to hand over part of my life's work to a waiter who spent his entire life hating me?" "I'm asking you to save your company," the man said coldly. "You either make peace with him, or we'll find someone else to take your seat." The words hit Harold harder than he expected. That afternoon, Harold's limo pulled up outside Malik's modest apartment building. He stepped out alone, no bodyguards, no assistants, just Harold Crestwell, looking smaller somehow without his entourage. When Malik opened the door, he didn't move aside to let him in. "What do you want?" Malik asked flatly. Harold exhaled. "A chance to fix this. The board wants me to bring you into the company, give you a position, a title, a stake. You'd be set for life. You'd have influence, power, everything I've ever denied you." Malik crossed his arms, his face unreadable. "So, now you want to parade me around like a trophy son to save your empire?" Harold flinched. "This isn't just about me. If you refuse, they'll destroy us both. You don't know how ruthless these people can be." Malik stared at him for a long moment. Then, quietly but firmly, he said, "I'm not interested in your money, or your empire. I want something more valuable." Harold frowned. "What?" "The truth. All of it." And for the first time in decades, Harold Crestwell felt something unfamiliar crawl up his spine. Fear. The press conference room was packed. Cameras lined the back wall, their red lights blinking like watchful eyes. Reporters murmured, pens poised, as the board members of Crestwell Enterprises filed into their seats. At the center of it all stood Harold Crestwell, his suit perfectly tailored, his posture immaculate, but his face pale and tight with tension. Malik watched from behind the stage curtain, his heart steady despite the storm outside. For weeks, he had been at the center of a media frenzy. An unknown waiter suddenly thrust into the spotlight as the secret son of one of the richest men in America. The world expected a spectacle today, a corporate stunt to bury the scandal and polish the Cresswell name. But Malik had other plans. Harold stepped up to the podium, cleared his throat, and began. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you today to address not a scandal, but a family. A mistake I made decades ago, one I have lived with every day since. His voice was steady, rehearsed, but his eyes flicked briefly to Malik, standing just out of sight. Today, I'd like to introduce my son, Malik Brooks. A ripple ran through the room. Flashbulbs popped. As Malik stepped forward, the chatter swelled into a roar. He wore a simple suit, not expensive, but sharp, and he carried himself with quiet strength. "Thank you," Malik said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm not here for your pity or your applause. I'm here because truth matters. For years, my mother and I lived in the shadows while Mr. Cresswell built his empire. But no amount of money can buy back time or silence a legacy." The room went still. Malik turned slightly toward Harold. "There's something my mother once told me. A man is measured not by his wealth, but by what he leaves behind." Harold looked at him for a long moment, his jaw working as if holding back words. Then, with visible effort, he removed the platinum eagle ring from his finger, the same ring that had set everything in motion, and held it out. "It was always meant to be yours," Harold said, his voice quieter now. "Not for the company, not for the power, but because you're my son." Malik stared at the ring, then at Harold. Slowly, he took it and slipped it onto his own finger. The weight of it was heavy, not in gold, but in meaning. "This isn't about power or legacy," Malik said to the crowd. "This is about reclaiming what was stolen from us. My mother's dignity, my place in this world. And for that, I won't stay silent anymore." The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed like lightning. Harold stood still, his expression unreadable, but there was a glint in his eyes, pride perhaps, or maybe a fragile hope for redemption. As Malik left the stage, the eagle ring catching the light, he felt lighter than he ever had before. No longer invisible, no longer silenced. He wasn't Harold Cresswell's mistake anymore. He was his legacy.